When Emma Clarke, a beloved florist from Seattle, is found murdered on Valentine's Day, all eyes turn to her charming British husband, Lucas Turner. But as investigators dig deeper, they uncover a chilling trail of women, from Isabelle Hartley in London to Rachel Monroe in Chicago, each seduced, manipulated, and destroyed by the same man under different names. Behind every romance was a lie, and behind every lie was Liam Vance, a master of love, deception, and death. What began as the perfect love story ends in a global manhunt to stop a predator who turned affection into a weapon. The morning of February 14, 2019, was unusually quiet in Seattle. A soft drizzle tapped against the windows as the city stretched awake under gray skies. Inside a cozy third-floor apartment in Capitol Hill, police officers moved silently through the hallway. Candlelight still flickered inside the living room, casting eerie shadows over what should have been a romantic celebration. Rose petals were scattered across the table. A box of untouched chocolates sat beside a single wine glass, and the scent of perfume clung faintly in the air. But beneath the illusion of love lay the lifeless body of Emma Clarke, her dress soaked in blood, her eyes staring into nothing. She had once been full of light. Friends remembered her as the woman who believed in fairy tales, even in adulthood. Her flower shop, Petals and Grace, was a favorite among locals, always bright, always blooming. She had a gentle heart, the kind that forgave easily and loved deeply. When she met Lucas Turner online, her world shifted. He was polite, well-read, handsome in a quiet, confident way. A British IT consultant working in the US, he spoke softly and made her laugh in ways no one else had. They exchanged long messages for months before meeting. Within a year they were married. Emma had been proud of their love story. She told friends it felt like fate, but those closest to her saw the subtle changes. She grew quieter, more distant. She stopped attending yoga, skipped brunches, and always had a reason why Lucas couldn't join social gatherings. When asked, she would smile and say, "He's busy, but he means well." Now, that smile was a haunting memory. When police arrived, Lucas was already there. He had called 911 himself, his voice low and trembling. He claimed he had returned home with a surprise gift bracelet in hand, only to find her on the floor. His eyes were red, but dry. His shirt had no stains. Detectives noted everything, especially how untouched the apartment seemed. No sign of forced entry, no broken glass, nothing stolen. Lucas kept repeating the same story. "I was out. I swear I didn't do this." Inside the precinct, Detective Mason reviewed security footage. Lucas had indeed left the building around 7:15 p.m., but the footage didn't capture his return until 10:40 p.m. The medical examiner placed time of death between 8 and 9 p.m. That left over an hour unaccounted for. What troubled Mason more was Emma's bank records. Just a week before her death, she had transferred $150,000 from her business savings into a joint account with Lucas. The money was now gone. When asked about it, Lucas blinked slowly and claimed it was for a down payment on a new home they had planned in Napa. But Emma had told her best friend just days ago that they had no such plans. In fact, she was worried. She'd hinted something didn't feel right anymore. As the rain picked up outside, Detective Mason stared at the crime board. A woman who loved too much. A husband with too many answers. A love story that had turned into a crime scene. Valentine's Day had always been a celebration of romance, but in this apartment, love had worn a mask, and underneath it was something darker. The gray skies over London matched the heavy mood of the reopened file on Isabelle Hartley. Her photo, headshot once used for a modeling portfolio, now sat clipped to the corner of a manila folder marked "Closed 2015." But the case was no longer closed. Across the Atlantic, the death of Emma Clarke had raised too many similarities. Two beautiful women, two charming relationships, and one man with different names. Isabelle's case had always felt unfinished, even to the original detective, though the evidence at the time had leaned toward suicide. Now, years later, What was once overlooked began to scream for attention. Isabelle had been a free spirit, a dreamer. Her social media was filled with vintage dresses, city walks, and handwritten poetry in dim cafes. When she met Ethan Ward, one of Lucas Turner's many aliases, she had just gotten out of a long, unhealthy relationship. Her friends remembered how her eyes lit up when she spoke of him. "He listens to me," she had written in a journal entry found months after her death. "He looks at me like I'm the only person that matters." It was the kind of love she had always wished for. But as the weeks passed, her posts grew less frequent, her poetry turned darker, her style more withdrawn. The day Isabelle died, it was raining. Her body was found on the floor of her flat in Brixton, the pill bottle still half full beside her. The coroner at the time had marked it an overdose, and with no note, no clear motive, and no sign of struggle, the police moved on. Yet now, with a second woman dead under suspicious circumstances, the pieces began to look different. Detective Elise Hammond, now reviewing the case, felt a chill in her chest as she read through Isabelle's final texts, especially the one she never sent. "I think he's lying to me. I'm scared." Elise couldn't shake the image of Isabelle alone in that small apartment, wondering who she had let into her life. Did she suspect something? Did she know what kind of man Ethan, or Lucas, really was? The bruises on her arms, once dismissed as accidental, were now considered carefully. They weren't consistent with a fall. They were tight, deliberate fingers maybe, evidence of a struggle, quickly concealed. Interpol confirmed Lucas Turner's fingerprints matched those collected from Isabelle's apartment under the name Ethan Ward. The UK team requested access to his digital trail, and it didn't take long to uncover the same pattern: a new identity, a whirlwind romance, followed by emotional withdrawal and financial manipulation. Liam Vance, his real name as they would later confirm, had buried himself in false lives like layers of clothing. The weight of it hit Elise in waves. All those years ago, Isabelle's death had been quietly Bacchus away, her name written off as another lonely heart who gave too much. But she hadn't died of despair. She had been erased softly, skillfully, by a man who knew how to wear affection like a costume. And as Elise closed the folder for the day, she felt a burning need not just for justice, but for someone to remember Isabelle as more than a victim. She had loved, hoped, trusted. And in the end, she had paid the price for a secret she never even knew she was keeping. Chicago's winter always carried a certain bitterness in its wind, but in early March 2017, the air had felt especially sharp for Rachel Monroe. She had just moved into a new apartment on the North Side, trying to rebuild a life that had unraveled without warning. At 32, she was smart, successful, and careful with her heart. But none of those things had protected her. She still remembered the first time she saw him. "James L. Turner," he said. British accent, neatly dressed, magnetic charm. They met on a dating app, and by the second date, Rachel felt something she hadn't in years: safety. It wasn't just the way he spoke or looked at her, it was the way he made her feel like she was finally enough. That illusion didn't last. Within weeks, James began to shift. The affection remained, but there were cracks, small lies, excuses that didn't add up. Once he told her he had a sister in need of urgent surgery, and asked if she could help him with a short-term loan. Her instincts had flared, but his eyes had filled with such believable sorrow that she silenced them. She wired $10,000 the next day. Then came the control. He started tracking her schedule, questioning her clothing choices, growing cold if she went out with friends. When she finally ended things, he didn't shout or plead. He just stared at her and said, "You'll regret this." That sentence never left her. Over the next few weeks, Rachel began receiving anonymous texts. Some contained private photos, intimate moments she never thought anyone else would see. The sender threatened to share them with her employer unless she wired more money. When she changed her number, she noticed her building's lobby camera had been disabled one evening. She found a note on her windshield that read, "You can run, but I'm always close." She filed a restraining order. The police took her seriously, but there was only so much they could do. He had vanished, No digital trace, no workplace, no address. The app profile was gone. He had become a ghost. 2 years later, when news broke of Emma Clarke's murder in Seattle, Rachel felt a tightening in her chest. The photo flashed on the screen, Lucas Turner. Her hand began to tremble. It was him. He had changed the name again, the city again. But the face, the posture, the gaze, it was all the same. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't alone. Detectives from the FBI arrived at her door days later. She told them everything, and they listened with careful eyes. Her experience painted a deeper picture, one that stretched beyond fraud or manipulation. He didn't just use women, he studied them, adapted to their dreams, spoke their language of love, until they were no longer sure of their own voice. Rachel felt vindicated but sick. She had lived, but others hadn't. The guilt ran deep. What if she'd gone public sooner? What if someone had connected the dots before Emma? As the agents left, one of them quietly said, "You helped more than you know." She watched them disappear down the hallway, feeling both exposed and redeemed. The wind outside howled through the cracks in her window, and she knew now it was never about love. It had always been about power, and she had survived it. The discovery came unexpectedly, hidden beneath a loose floorboard in Isabelle Hartley's old flat in Birmingham. Current tenant had been renovating when she noticed the odd panel, just slightly off alignment. Beneath it was a dusty shoebox, sealed with 2 strips of electrical tape. Inside was a small blue USB drive. When police received the call and took it in for analysis, they didn't know yet that this forgotten object would unlock the darkest corner of Isabelle's truth, and possibly her final scream for help. Detective Elise Hammond sat alone in the lab as the contents were loaded onto the computer. The folder named Valentine opened with a soft click, revealing Isabelle's final breadcrumb trail. There were dozens of files, voice memos, photos, screen captures, and handwritten scans, each one carefully named and dated. Isabelle had been watching him, documenting him. But why? As Elise clicked through the files, she felt a cold, creeping weight settle over her shoulders. There was something deeply intimate and quietly desperate about the contents. One audio note began with the rustle of paper and Isabelle's shaky breath. Her voice, soft and distant, confessed, "I don't think I know who he is anymore." The line struck Elise like a whisper in the dark. The woman had been living in the same flat, walking the same streets, and slowly unraveling the truth, alone. The photos showed receipts, expensive watches, electronics, and online purchases made with her credit card, none of which she ever mentioned to family or friends. Notes described moments where he had disappeared for days, offering vague explanations that didn't align with reality. One document listed all his names: Ethan, James, Lucas. She had circled them in red, writing, "Why so many names?" One of the last files chilled Elise to her core. It was a video clip, taken from Isabelle's phone. The camera was pointed at a closed door, just slightly ajar. Heavy breathing filled the frame. In a whisper, Isabelle said, "He doesn't know I'm recording. He's talking to someone. I think he's planning something. I'm afraid to sleep tonight." The clip ended with silence. No confrontation, no cries, just that haunting calm before something terrible. The digital trail led to an encrypted server registered under the alias Valentine. Elise worked with cybercrime analysts to break through the security wall. Inside were buried records of identity forgeries, passport scans, account transfers, and email exchanges with other women, some names familiar, some unknown. The man they had been chasing wasn't just a liar, he was a professional predator, with layers of lies woven so tightly that even time had struggled to untangle them. Sitting in the dim light of the lab, Elise felt a strange mix of grief and admiration. Isabelle had been terrified, but she had fought to hold on to the truth. She had left behind a map, a silent guide to the man who had stolen not just her heart, but her entire future. She hadn't died in ignorance. She had died knowing, and maybe, in some small way, she knew someone would find this. Someone would finally see her, not just as a name in a closed file, but as the key to the secret he had spent years trying to bury. New York moved at its usual unstoppable pace, unaware that the man walking among its crowds had a history written in blood and heartbreak. Daniel Fisher, as he now called himself, had crafted his newest life with surgical precision. His hair was shorter, dyed a warmer shade of brown, he wore glasses now and dressed in neutral, modest clothing. He had traded his old arrogance for a quieter charm. His new apartment in Queens was small but tidy, a perfect setting for a man who claimed to be starting over after losing his parents abroad. No one questioned him, no one saw through him, and Claire Mitchell, his fiancée, believed she was about to marry the man of her dreams. Claire was a middle school teacher. She had met Daniel at a bookstore on a rainy afternoon. He had offered her his umbrella, and their story unfolded like the kind of romantic fiction she loved to read. He was attentive, generous, and respectful of her space. After years of disappointment, he seemed too good to be true, and yet she let herself believe. She let herself hope. He had begun to isolate her gently, discouraging late nights out, suggesting she take fewer photos online, asking her to trust him with her passwords just in case. But he never raised his voice, never laid a hand on her. He was too careful for that. Claire noticed a few strange things: a locked drawer in his closet, a refusal to meet her family during holidays, but she chalked it up to trauma, as he said, from a painful past he didn't want to relive. The morning of his arrest started like any other. Daniel went to meet Claire for coffee in Midtown. He kissed her on the cheek and told her he was thinking of moving in fully. Her heart fluttered. They sat near the window, sipping lattes, surrounded by the city's chaos. Then, quietly, two plainclothes officers entered. Daniel noticed them before they reached him. His eyes locked with one of theirs for a second too long, and something shifted behind his gaze. Not panic, but a strange peace, like someone who had always known this day would come. When they handcuffed him, Claire didn't scream. She couldn't. Her mind went blank as her heart crumbled. The man she loved had become a stranger in seconds. She stood frozen as people around her gasped and whispered. She heard one officer mutter, "Liam Vance, wanted in 2 countries." That name meant nothing to her, and yet everything at once. It meant her entire life had been a lie. The trial was swift. The evidence, Isabelle's USB, Rachel's testimony, Emma's bank transfers, countless forged documents, was irrefutable. He confessed on video, calm and composed, as if reading lines from a script he had written long ago. In his final message, he described love as a tool, a currency more powerful than money, and Valentine's Day as the perfect mask. People expect roses, not razor blades. He was sentenced to life without parole. In the courtroom, Claire never looked at him again. She didn't cry. She simply left her engagement ring on the table beside his confession file. Outside, the cold wind cut through the streets of Manhattan. A woman who had loved deeply, and a man who had hunted that love like prey. He had hidden his secret behind warmth, behind smiles, behind promises. But even the brightest lies cannot outrun the truth forever. The prison cell was small, bare, and lifeless. Nothing like the spaces Liam Vance had once lived in. No candles, no charm, no illusions, just concrete walls and a metal bed that creaked with every breath. The man who had once moved effortlessly between cities, names, and women, now woke to silence broken only by the distant echoes of clanging doors. His days blurred into one another, swallowed by routine, but his mind remained sharp, always calculating, always observing. In isolation, he seemed unaffected, unbothered. He spent hours staring at the ceiling, replaying memories not with guilt, but with quiet analysis. To the world outside, his story had ended. The monster was caged. Justice had been served. But something about it all felt incomplete. Reporters kept digging. Podcasts devoted entire seasons to unraveling his trail. Victims who never came forward before began contacting authorities, each with a similar tale: trust, intimacy, betrayal. One woman in Manchester claimed he had proposed to her another in Boston said he drained her savings after promising to start a business together. Their names weren't in the official file, but their stories fit perfectly into the puzzle. Detective Elise Hammond returned to Birmingham one final time to walk through Isabelle Hartley's flat. The floor had been replaced, the walls repainted, but the atmosphere still held something heavy. She stood by the window, hands in her coat pockets, and thought about everything Isabelle had left behind, not just evidence, but truth that had nearly gone unheard. Without her silent bravery, Liam might never have been unmasked. Elise felt a strange bond with her, one that couldn't be explained with words. It was as if Isabelle had reached out from beyond death, and placed the final piece in her hand. Meanwhile, Claire Mitchell was still learning how to breathe again. Every morning, she looked in the mirror and asked herself, "How did I not see it?" Shame ran deep, twisting, like vines around her heart. She replayed every smile, every embrace, wondering how she had mistaken manipulation for love. Yet in those quiet hours before sunrise, she also found fragments of strength. She wasn't just a victim, she had survived him. She had broken the chain. Sometimes that was enough. Sometimes it had to be. In Seattle, Emma Clarke's mother visited her daughter's grave. A single red rose, perfectly arranged, rested on the granite. The city had moved on, but she never would. Emma's apartment was still locked, untouched, since that night. She couldn't bring herself to go inside, not yet, maybe not ever. As the seasons changed, and the story faded from headlines, Liam Vance remained silent. No appeals, no remorse. But one day, during a random cell inspection, a guard found a torn page from a library book hidden beneath his mattress. On the back, scribbled in pencil, was a single line, "You only ever see the blood when the rose is in full bloom." No one knew what it meant, but for those left behind, it was a reminder. Evil doesn't always arrive with fury. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it whispers promises, and sometimes it wears the face of love.